Hello and welcome to Middle East Matters here on France 24. I'm Delano D'Souza filling in for Sanam Chantier. On the show this week, 1 year after anti-government protests in Lebanon pushed the Prime Minister from power, the people of the country say they feel betrayed. Targeted killings by militia groups in Iraq result in more and more young activists fleeing the country. In the past year alone, nearly 40 people have been gunned down. And after officially normalizing ties, a government delegation from the United Arab Emirates visits Israel, the two sides signing a visa exemption treaty, Israel's first with an Arab country. Now, it's been 1 year since anti-government protests broke out in Lebanon. They resulted in the resignation of the country's Prime Minister Saad Hariri. However, the sectarian system of politics protesters wanted changed remains intact in Lebanon today. Frustrations in the country came bubbling to the surface 2 months ago after a blast rocked Beirut's port. Since then, the political class have failed to form a government, and the people of Lebanon say they feel betrayed.
A year on from the start of a movement that's rocked Lebanese politics, hundreds of protesters gathered in Martyrs Square. Far fewer than last year, when hundreds of thousands took to streets across the country. But protesters who turned up were as resolute as ever to see the end of a political elite that has ruled for decades.
مستمرة ومنا مرتبطة بتواريخ. مساء بأنه اليوم دعوا الشباب بالنسبة لذكرى الثورة للاحتفال بهيدا اليوم. بس الاحتفال بكبير لما بنقضي على المافيا، لما منغير هيدي السلطة ومنغير النظام السياسي الطائفي.
الثورة ما ماتت، عم نقدر نحاسب هيدي السلطة الفاسدة، الدليل هالشيء نزلوا حكومتين، الدليل هالشيء عم يتخبطوا، مش عم يقدروا ياخذوا قرار ولا عم يقدروا انكشفوا قدام المجتمع الدولي وانكشف فسادهم، هذا الشيء اللي كانوا مستهترين بالشعب اللبناني ومستهترين بالعملة اللبنانية، بين هيدي الطبقة الفاسدة كلها سوا، نحن اليوم ثورتنا مكملة يا صندوق الانتخابات.
The movement has yet to achieve its goal, though. Two governments have resigned, but the country's rulers remain in power. Meanwhile, Lebanon's deepest economic downturn since the civil war has led to growing unemployment and poverty, pushing many to emigrate. The coronavirus pandemic has also robbed the protests of momentum. As evening fell, demonstrators gathered near Beirut's damaged port to light a flame, marking the moment, 6:07 p.m., that the deadly August 4th blast occurred. That disaster prompted some of the movement's efforts to shift to relief operations, filling in for a largely absent state. Next Thursday sees talks begin between the president and parliamentary blocs to choose a new prime minister. Saad Hariri, who bowed out in the face of protests last October, is expected to make a comeback, in an appointment that activists are likely to reject.
Now, authorities in Israel have relaxed a nationwide lockdown to limit the spread of COVID-19. The restrictions limited movement to 1 kilometer of people's homes. Kindergartens, beaches and national parks are now open. But unlike the reopening of the economy earlier this year, the Prime Minister says experts are being listened to this time around. Take a listen.
Today we are beginning our exit from the lockdown. This time we are cautiously and responsibly exiting from the lockdown, following the exact outline proposed to us by experts and by the Health Ministry, including the cities in red zones.
Independent rights organizations say at least 39 people have been killed, while at least 44 others have been kidnapped in Iraq. This following the anti-government protests, which took place last October, when people were out on the streets demanding jobs and better public services. Targeted killings by militia groups have pushed more and more young Iraqi activists to flee. Emerald Maxwell reports.
On November 6, 2019, Mohammed's life was turned upside down. That day, his brother Amjad was meeting with police and human rights activists like himself to discuss a planned protest in their hometown in southern Iraq. As he left the meeting, he was killed by a group of gunmen in a car.
مسافة 500 متر فقط تم اغتياله بسيارة بدون لوحات، سيارة سوداء مظللة بدون لوحات.
A year ago, thousands of Iraqis like Amjad took to the streets in mass anti-government protests, demanding jobs and the departure of the ruling elite, which they said was corrupt. Then human rights activists and journalists began to be targeted.
والله يطلع يطالب حقوق الناس يعني ما كان يطالب بمنصب أو حكم أو يعني يتوقع يريد شيء يريد وطن يعني الناس الفقراء هاي خطية الناس الجوعانة بلا راتب يعني إنسان مسالم.
Rights organisation Al Amal says at least 39 killings and 44 kidnappings have taken place in the last year. This has pushed dozens of people to flee the country, including one of Amjad's activist friends who'd been with him the night that he died. Having received death threats himself, he decided to leave Iraq.
أمجد الدهامات انقتل قرب قيادة شرطة ميسان بالمجمع الحكومي اللي كل الدوائر الدولة موجودة هناك إلها حمايات منشآت وساعة التظاهر المحمية من قبل القوات الأمنية فصارت قناعة تامة إنه القوات الأمنية ما تقدر تحمينا من خطر العصابات اللي موجودة المنتشرة بالعالم.
Mohammed has kept in touch with his brother's old friends. Among this group of activists, the optimism of last autumn has given way.
فبتشرين كان ثمة أمل لكنه وقت على يد هؤلاء القتلة.
The government has vowed to crack down on what it says are criminal armed groups trying to destabilise the country, and it has launched an investigation into Amjad's death. But speaking on condition of anonymity, a military official said the authorities were often impotent against the militias because those groups had powerful political backers. Amjad's family were told they would see the results of the investigation within 3 months. 4 months have passed with no word.
Here's a look at some of the other stories making headlines around the region.
The school year is now underway in Yemen, but the civil war that has been raging for 6 years has left 2 million children with no access to education. This school in Taiz was hit by an airstrike in 2016. Now the teachers and pupils must navigate a partially cleared minefield just to sit under the crumbling ceilings. The disastrous effects of the war have only been worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yemen is the most serious humanitarian crisis in the world today. Teachers in Yemen are very poorly paid. For the last 2 years, we've been providing incentives for 160,000 teachers so that they can have enough to live.
In response to the pandemic, schools are now offering a blend of in-class and at-home learning. UNICEF is appealing for donors to support education in the country. 4 out of every 5 children in Yemen are in need of humanitarian assistance, and 1/3 are not in school. Qadiyah refugee camp in northern Iraq, home to 15,000 uprooted people, primarily Yazidis. Among them, Hiba Qasim. Her difficult situation hasn't stopped her from excelling in her academic studies. She has just achieved one of the highest marks in the country in her high school final exams.
It was a very difficult year because we live in camps, as you can see. There was no proper teaching staff here, but my father hired a car for me, which I used to go to Dohuk every day to attend the Mosul High School for displaced girls.
A 150-kilometre round trip every day just to go to school. Hiba's family fled from Sinjar, where an attack by the so-called Islamic State killed 5,000 Yazidis. But she hopes her marks will bring her a brighter future. She aims to become a doctor to help others in her community. Touchdown in Bahrain as an Israeli delegation arrives for a ceremony to formalize ties with the island state, which becomes only the 4th Arab country to do so.
Such a peace will bring a new stability and prosperity to the region, allowing our young people across the Middle East to achieve the potential and aspirations which they have been denied for too long.
Also signed in the meeting, memos covering trade, telecommunications, finance and agriculture. The recent spate of countries warming ties with Israel has been overseen by the United States, which hopes to further ostracize Iran in the region. But the moves have been met with indignation by Palestinians, who see the new friendships as a stab in the back.
Now, months after the United Arab Emirates and Israel normalized ties, the red carpet was rolled out for a government delegation from the UAE. The two sides signed several deals, including a mutual visa exemption agreement, Israel's first with any Arab country. While all this was happening, the first musical collaboration between the two sides has come out. Ahlan Bik, or Hello You in Arabic, is a duet between Israeli singer El Kana Marziano and Emirati artist Walid Al Jassim. The video has already been viewed over 1 million times on YouTube. The artists say the song is a way for people in both countries to get to know each other, while critics say the musical style demonstrates that the two cultures are intertwined. That's it for this edition of Middle East Matters. From all of us on the team, thank you very much for watching.